So when I was in college, I used to pull all-nighters and fuel myself with takeout and coffee during exam week, like any other student. It was early January, so the area around my apartment, which mostly had outstation uni students, was pretty deserted as most of the people hadn't returned from their winter break. But I, unfortunately, still had an exam left. It was around 2 a.m. that night. My friend and flatmate and I decided to order some food, but our usual restaurant wasn't accepting orders online, so we decided to head out and grab some cup noodles and soda from a nearby 24/7 store. Anyway, as we walked by, most of the usual night stores were shut, and even the 24/7 store was closed for some maintenance issue. I was disheartened, but still very hungry, so I opened my phone trying to see if anything else was open nearby. I was browsing my phone for any place that might be open, and my friend started messing around, saying that she saw something move inside one of the stores, and maybe it was following us. And I brushed her off as usual, as I knew she had a habit of trying to spook me. However, as we started to head back home, my friend suddenly huddled close to me and told me to call someone. Me being the hungry and dense idiot that I am, I thought that she meant to call up a restaurant, so I told her in an annoyed tone that I was trying, damn it. We reached a T-point intersection in the main road when my friend suggested that we take the inner lane, which is a shortcut to our apartment, as the streetlights on the main road are out and it's pretty dark there. I agreed quickly, as the inner lane is pretty well lit and we know our way around. As we walked into the lane, my friend, who had been acting strangely until now, started to tug me by my elbow, and before I could question her, she looked at me in the eye with a somewhat scared smile and told me that we needed to run. She then started to run, like actually full-on sprinting. Now, usually I ignore her antics when she tries these practical jokes on me, but for some reason that night, I too began to run because something in my gut told me to listen to her. However, after a bit, I was cold and out of breath. I yelled at her, "Can you just fucking stop? Ugh, there's no one around. Stop messing." She slowed her pace and turned around, and by now, I was more than annoyed at her for trying to spook me. Mind you, by this point, there were a few feet of gap between us, and as I caught my breath and turned to look at her, I could see her expression had paled all of a sudden. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking behind me. It was at this point my sleep-deprived, cranky brain realized that something was seriously wrong, and I heard a noise behind me. What I didn't know was that our stalker, who had been steadily following us, was only a couple of feet behind me, and when I had yelled at her, he heard me and started to run towards me. I still can't completely describe that moment, the sound of someone's weird laughter and footfall behind you, the sound of your own pounding heart, the way your ears go all hot and tingly. It was my body being aware of just a lot at once. So when I semi-turned back and saw a random-ass full-grown man sprinting his way towards me, I didn't know how to react. I'd like to think that I could have unfroze myself, but it wasn't until my friend forcefully gripped me by the arm and started pulling me that I began to run. I heard him yell, roar, behind us, but I couldn't understand what he was trying to say, and at this point, I was busy running and too scared to turn around. I think that it was the adrenaline in my veins and my friend's grip on my arm that helped me not lose my shit and run the fastest I've ever in my life. We zigzagged our way through the lanes to lose him, and we finally managed to get to our block. The last my friend turned to check, he began to slow down in his pursuit when we crossed the barricade to our area. When we entered our apartment building, I crumpled down by the elevator floor, still trying to process the entire chase and figure out why this man decided to chase us. My friend then told me that she's seen him looking strangely at us when we were around the convenience store, and he was near a truck unloading some boxes. She dismissed him, assuming that he was a part of the store maintenance crew, but something about him had made her feel uneasy. Later on, when we were at the T-point from where we entered the inner lanes, she said that she saw him again with his truck following behind, and felt that it could be a coincidence, but that she felt that it was still better to take the inner lane where the truck couldn't go in. When she finally saw him for the third time by the corner of the lane, silently walking his way towards us, she knew that he was following us for real, and we had to shake him off. She always used to jokingly quote to me, "Once is hapstance, twice is coincidence, but thrice is enemy action." I still think it couldn't be more true in this case. Even though a lot of my friends later told me that we could have taken him on as he was only one person while we were two, at that time we didn't want to take chances in case he had his friends waiting around. To this day, I think the fact that I trusted my gut to run, even though I was unaware of the exact nature of the danger behind me initially, and also my friend that ran back to drag my dumb ass even when she could have easily outrun him. It's been 3 years since, and even now, my brain automatically tries to scan who is around me and tries to mark out possible exits of any room. This happened a year ago, so the details might not be as great. In my senior year, grade 12, of high school, I attended a party called Frosh, or Slosh, which is a party hosted and made for the graduating class of the year. I went to the party, but I didn't drink or smoke weed due to personal medical issues. So almost everyone was drinking and or smoking weed, and people got pretty shit-faced. The party started to end at about midnight, but I decided that I should stay behind because there were a few young and inebriated freshmen that were waiting for their rides. So by 1 a.m, there were only a few kids left, and before going, I made sure that they had rides. I walked to my car, which was kind of alone and secluded away from the area the party had been happening. I got into my car and started it, but I got a gut feeling to stick around and wait for the stragglers to be picked up. A few minutes later, I see a car coming, and I think it's the parents. But instead of stopping, it gets closer and closer towards my car. By now, I could identify it as a blue truck with big floodlights on its roof. It was jacked up by at least 2 feet more than normal. So this truck pulls up to me, and I start getting nervous that this person was the landowner or a farmer coming to ask me about the party. He pulls up inches away from my side mirror, so close that not even a small body would be able to slip between the vehicles. I rolled down my window, halfway expecting to have a conversation with the landowner. It started out basic. He asked if I had been drinking or doing any drugs. He was very repetitive with the question. At the time, I thought he was just concerned if I should be driving, and I reassured him that no, I hadn't done any of that, and was sober and waiting for parents to arrive. He told me he owned the land and that he was checking on the property as it is in a well-known location for high school parties in the fall season. The location is a sand pit that construction companies dig out and transport sand from, and it was about 20 feet deep from ground level. He asked me what school I went to and what the party was for. I told him vague answers, but respectfully phrased that I wouldn't tell him because my school could get in trouble. After a while, he started asking weirder questions, like if I had a boyfriend, did I want a boyfriend, was I into older men? He seemed to be in his early 30s, and I was 18 at the time. When he was asking these things, I had alarm bells ringing in my head. I started to wonder if he was even the landowner and about how much I had told him. Since he couldn't see me from his vantage point in the tall truck, I looked around my car doors to see if they were locked and was eyeing my window button. Then he asked me if I
wanted to come party with us in the other sandpit.
Us? Who is us? I asked. He then told me that he had friends in the back of the truck. At that point, only the driver had spoken, and his truck was so tall that it was impossible to see into his windows from my driver's seat. He was on the left side. My driver's seat is American style. I was mortified that I had no idea that there were others with him this whole time, and that they could have come to my driver's side when he kept me distracted. I told him no, and that I was just waiting for the kids to be picked up. He asked me one more time if I wanted to come with him to have a small bonfire in the other sandpit. I refused again, and eventually they left. Only later on did I realize that they had come looking for a more intoxicated and vulnerable girl, and that unfortunately for them, they found me, sober, instead. I have no doubt that they had been looking to lure some drunk girls to take advantage of in the other secluded sandpit. I take my dad's ashes up to Glacier National Park every year. I lived in Colorado when this story happened, and I was headed south through Idaho after I had visited Montana. My car broke down in Salmon, Idaho, and a nice man helped me out. I was headed through the mountains to Boise to visit a friend. It was about a 5-hour drive before I entered the truly mountainous section of Idaho. I saw a hot spring on the side of this 2-lane highway along the Salmon River. I decided to take a dip after the stress of having my car break down. The hot spring had a bathhouse up at the top near the road, and a wheelchair ramp that went down to the area near the springs, where they were on the side of the river. People had created little bath-shaped sections in the river that were separated by river stones. Actually, you could sit in a spot that was shaped like a hot tub so that it held the water from the hot springs while the river rushed over it. I got out of my car and headed down to the hot spring. I took my dog with me. It was twilight. About every half hour, a car passed by. Knowing that I was alone, essentially, I took off my top. I was sitting in the hot springs and actually took a photo of a car approaching. The car pulled up next to mine in front of the bathhouse. It was a truck with 3 men in it. Seamlessly, one man got out of the driver's seat and 2 men got out of the passenger's side. They moved without qualms and were covered in heavy black gear. They looked like hunters. I couldn't see the expressions on their faces. The driver headed down the wheelchair ramp towards me, not hesitating. He took big, long strides. I recognized that there was danger. The 2 passengers from the other side of the car headed down the steep bank along the wheelchair ramp, taking a shortcut. I was stuck between both parties. Hastening, I hid and dressed myself under water while my dog growled. He never growls. I only heard him growl all of twice my life, and this was the 2nd time. The driver kept on walking towards me. He walked out onto the rocks into the river, continuously walking towards me, even though he was covered in heavy gear that could get him waterlogged if he fell in the river. The other 2 passengers from the side of the car were also walking out on the rocks, directly in front of me. The driver got so close that I had to grab my dog before he lashed out at the driver. I was freaking out. The man was walking out onto the stones so that he could reach me. He was not hesitating. I couldn't see his face. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and my clothes. I dragged my dog in between the 2 parties, my heart in my ears. The driver would not stop. He turned around very quickly, making an arc, coming for me still. He was still taking big strides. The passengers were walking towards me as well. I was trapped between them. I ran up the bank, dragging my dog pretty much by his collar all the way into my car. The only way that I could get into my car without them grabbing me was throwing my dog into the back and lunging myself into the passenger side of my car. I threw my keys into the ignition and turned them right when the men were walking up between my car and their car. I happened to hit the lock button on the door right when they walked up. Before anything else happened, or before I saw their faces, I ended up throwing myself into the driver's seat, reversing my car, and hightailing it out of there. I drove 20 minutes down the road. I crossed the river on a bridge and hid my car behind a bank near other campers. It was well hidden from the main road. The campers were looking at me, wondering what was going on. I sat and I waited. Another 10 minutes passed by, and lo and behold, the truck drove by. The hunters were looking for me. I managed to wait another half an hour and drove up to the mountains, over to Boise, and into safety.